How did you become a musician? And why percussion? And whether there is a history of music in your family? Where is this whole obsession coming from?
Yeah, so my mom did play violin when she was in middle school, high school. It wasn't really a part of our lives growing up. She didn't play it as an adult. But I think, most of my intro into music was through, my older brother played saxophone, clarinet and saxophone in band, and then I started band like you usually would, and I played trumpet for the first year, and I wasn't very good at it. I was no Chris Coletti, and so I was going to quit. My mom really didn't want me to quit. Because
you didn't feel good about it. You didn't enjoy it.
It was like early in the morning before school. It was like this extra thing. It wasn't during the school day, and I wasn't very good at it, and I didn't really enjoy it. But then my best friend who played clarinet was like, well, you can switch to percussion in 6th grade. Well, he was switching, so I'll switch with him, and do percussion. And then I remember in our summer band camp, like the intro, like teaching you how to hold the sticks, and had a drum pad, and I was the only one who could do like a drum roll right away. Like just sort of, I could figure it out tactically. I could figure it out, and that felt kind of cool. Like I was like, oh, I like this when I'm good at a thing. And so that just started it. I was interested, and my brother was pretty serious about playing saxophone, and he was in all these honors youth wind bands, and I'd go to his concerts. So I had an opportunity to see the kids who were really excelling at music. I got to see them do it. And
so your entry point to music was band music.
Band music. Yeah. Orchestra was not even something I'd ever thought about.
And then what happened?
Well, I was going to Cleveland every week. I live in Ohio, and in a suburb of Cleveland, and I would go into Cleveland to do these honors wind band things in the morning, and there was a youth orchestra at this place called the Cleveland Orchestra. Never heard of it, but one of the coaches actually of the wind band was a member of the Cleveland Orchestra because his son was also a percussionist in the wind band. So I remember this adult was playing timpani in rehearsal, and I had no idea who he was, and that's the timpanist of the Cleveland Orchestra. I'm kind of like, well, what's the Cleveland Orchestra? Apparently it was a big deal. And so, a pretty good place to get introduced to what an orchestra is growing up in Cleveland. And so I eventually auditioned for the youth orchestra, and when I was a junior in high school, I finally got in. It was pretty competitive, and yeah, just being in Cleveland, I'd go on Saturdays, and I would finish my my ensembles and my lesson, and I would go to see the Cleveland Orchestra. Like that was a normal thing, and it's such a fortunate. I didn't know how fortunate I was.
Well, having an orchestra in a city in general makes a huge difference, but if it's the Cleveland Orchestra, that's a very unique history there.
Access is important.
The city, and the orchestra. Yeah, access is very important, especially if you want to get to know that rep that is only there and it's not available.
It's hard to imagine what my path would have been without an orchestra being in this place that I lived, so it's valuable.
What's your HSO history? When did you join the orchestra?
Okay.
And if you can remember the very first program you ever played with HSO.
Yes, I do remember. I started in 2005. I won the audition in November of 2005. My first concert.
Almost 20 years.
I know. Oh. I'm approaching my big 2-0 next season, I guess. I won the audition in November. I was still in school. I was 20 years old. And then I came out here to play a YPC concert. That was my first service.
Which is Young People's
Concert. Sorry, yeah. A Young People's Concert for the kids. And I was with our previous music director, Carlos Miguel Prieto, and I remember the first thing I played in rehearsal was, I'm going to space out. And there's a big xylophone solo. I'm spacing out on what piece it is. But Pop's Hoedown, I think.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Pop's Hoedown. Yeah. And it was the first thing I played. I was alone. It just stops, and it was me playing. I was so nervous. I'm in a professional orchestra. But so that was my first service. But then the first like large, classical concert, I believe was the Planets. It was the Planets or Copeland 3. We'll have to look in the archives. The Planets or Copeland 3, but they were definitely both that same season. And yeah, it was so cool to play music and be amongst professionals. And, it was one of the few people in school getting to do it. I was young and very fortunate to.
I know this is a little bit like asking somebody who your favorite kid is, although you have one child, so there's. I have two boys, and and you never pick your favorite. Mm-hmm. But if I ask you about instruments you have to play as a percussionist, do you have a favorite?
Yeah.
Are you more a mallet person versus?
No, I am in an orchestra. So technically in this orchestra I play percussion, but if I got to choose one instrument to play in an orchestra, it would be timpani. I just like how active it is, how the different roles it gets to play, the relationships with the other instruments that happen. But if I got to play one percussion instrument forever, it would be cymbals. Without
really?
Question. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's just.
I'm just picturing you in an island alone.
With my desert island instrument.
Yes.
Maybe
with
if I was
cymbals.
Maybe on a desert island, I might take a marimba or something. But okay. In an orchestra, I think it's just that they're very satisfying. Also. Composers rarely write in great detail for the instrument. There's just like a lot of interpretation. You can just be really creative with especially older music,
Which is, I think, in general true for percussion playing. You have to be creative. Sometimes creating your own instruments, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not everything, but the kitchen sink is the whole thing now. I mean, anything could be a percussion instrument, but when you're just playing with the sort of Western classical battery. I mean, you're just exploring sounds, that's what we're supposed to be good at is, finding something really interesting about something that's been played for hundreds of years. Or like the Rachmaninoff this week. So, yeah.
What else do you do outside of Huntsville in music is
okay.
what I mean. Yeah. Other
right.
gigs?
So, yeah, I live in New York City. I've been flying out here to do this gig for a long while. If you would have asked me if I'd still be doing that when I first got the job, I wouldn't have, asked me if I would be doing it. I would have said no, not for any reason other than, I don't know, you just think things are gonna change, but I've really enjoyed Huntsville. I've loved seeing it grow. I've loved having a relationship with, a different community than a sort of big metropolitan city. But in New York, I make, most of my living as a musician, either playing extra with Lincoln Center orchestras. I get to play, luckily, frequently with the New York Philharmonic. My former teacher is the principal there, and so that's about as good as it gets. It's a blast doing that. And then also playing on Broadway, which is unique to New York, though everybody seems to get Broadway shows now through the tours and their theater, systems here. And that's really fun. People go to New York to see Broadway shows. Like the energy of an audience at a show is just the appreciation is so palpable. And so it's just fun to go to work every day and get clapped for that much. It's cool. It's a great community.
And then in a setting like that for Broadway, you have a lot to do as a percussionist, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're essentially sometimes doing like the job of 3 or 4 percussionists. I mean, it's gotten pretty wild, to the point where, you would think a Broadway show, like maybe certain shows, you would think what you hear from the percussion doesn't sound challenging, but then if you watched the percussionist logistically manage like a note here, a cymbal roll there, a timpani note here, and just watch the organization of it, that's kind of where a lot of the virtuosity of that lies, is the logistical part of it. But also the styles, the different styles. One of the shows I get to, I don't have my own show now. I actually closed in May. I was on Sweeney Todd, which is very orchestral. Yeah, it's like an orchestra gig, essentially. But, I sub on shows now. So the regulars, they need a night off. They call you, and you've learned it, and go in. And so I'm subbing on MJ, the Michael Jackson musical. So you go from playing timpani and triangle and suspended cymbal to suddenly playing Motown and Thriller and all these electronic pads to make all these crazy hand clap sounds. A completely different world. And so I don't think you'd get access to that if I wasn't playing on Broadway. So it's pretty cool.
And talking about different gigs and this community, you have something you started here in Huntsville a couple of years ago.
Yes, it's called Rocket City New Music, and it really kind of you had me play a concerto with the orchestra, Andy Akiho's percussion concerto back in 2020 January, and I had been like stewing with this idea, like wouldn't it be cool to start something? And if I started, I'm lucky. I have this access to a community that I think would really like enjoy something like Rocket City New Music, and rather than jumping on the whole New York bandwagon where there's so much art going on there, and it's amazing what happens there, but I just felt lucky that I had this other place that I go to frequently. So I decided to start Rocket City New Music, and I'm a percussionist. Most of our music's new. The stuff being, so the bulk of what we do is by living composers, so I was already sort of tethered to that world. I knew what was going on and who was writing and who was being commissioned, and I was just thrilled to jumpstart it. We're actually finishing our third season on December 14th.
And what's your experience with Huntsville audiences and new music? We're talking about new music as in living composers,
living
right?
composers.
You don't play anything else, just music of today.
Right. Occasionally we'll reference an old piece if it, thematically, if it makes sense for the program. But living composers. We have the audience have been really enthusiastic. It's kind of that's the juice that keeps it going after, you put a ton of work into it. And as anyone who knows who's started an arts organization, it's a labor of love at the front, especially. And, you get to the end of that week of getting through a concert. It's been months of planning, and then the week's hyper intense. And then you get to talk to people after, and you just feel the enthusiasm. And to feel that idea that I had in my head, like, this music needs to be heard. It should be heard by more than only the people who went to the one premiere of said piece. Yeah. Like, these things need to be played again.
It happens a lot in contemporary music that pieces get played once and then never again.
Yeah, a composer we've played often, Chris Cerrone, said to me recently, he's like, I just really think people need to focus on second performances more.
I couldn't agree more. Yes,
and I feel like,
totally.
And we're trying to figure out the commissioning and putting actually new pieces out, but in the spirit of that, we're just playing stuff that probably hasn't gotten played that much, and only played by the ensemble maybe who commissioned it. So it's really fun. It's kind of, I know a lot. There's a lot of groups and a lot of organizations already championing that, and I think they're all great. It's just fun to participate in that mission. Yeah.
So talking about this, and you have lots of enthusiasm for it, and your eyes lit up when you talk about projects like that. Just to continue on that track, how do you see, what do you think of the state of our art form in general, including contemporary music, but let's just say classical music, and where are we going to be in 20, 30, 40 years? Is this going to go away? Is this a waste of time and energy and money? Is this going belly up, 6 feet under, gonna disappear, or maybe not? Maybe it's there for a reason for hundreds of years.
I don't think
that was a loaded question.
Yeah, it's a lot. I feel very responsible for the future of our industry all of a sudden. The people who play it and the people who champion, it's a passionate people. They're not doing it for personal gain often, very much. They're doing it because they love it, they believe in it, they believe in the mission of art, the sort of the access to it that can be offered to anyone. Like, everybody can experience something, they have a relationship with it, and that experience is never wrong. Love it, hate it, sad about it, makes you think of this thing or that thing, they're all correct. And that's an amazing, you can have a poem, but there's words, and we all speak the language, right? Yeah. So there's I don't want to say there's right or wrong, but there's a different access to it than just music. It can be so profound. And I do think it's the kind of thing that it takes a while for people to find their way through it. And I think even harder today in our sort of digital world where there's just so much all the time. But I just so think it's important that it's there for the people who do want to find it. Like one of the things I always said about Rocket City New Music at the very beginning was, Huntsville wants to be a music city. Like that's something they're championing. Yeah. They're really working hard for. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, well, you got to have everything.
That segment.
You can't. I think like the cheesy phrase I said was like raising the thread count of the cultural fabric. Like nobody gets lost. Nobody gets through without having that access to it. So there are it might not be millions and millions and millions of purchases of records, but it's changing lives in its own way, and I think it's
definitely making this city a better place and
a
better place for business. I mean, there is, for those of you who don't know, there is a music officer of the city of Huntsville now, and there's a strategy to indeed making Huntsville into a music place where people, where acts can stop on the way from
there's a lot going on.
A lot going on, and I think it is growing the audience as well.
A little something for everybody, and I think the arts make people better. They make the world better. I wish I was more eloquent, could speak how I actually feel.
But then you would be a writer.
But then I'd be a writer. I mean, like
playwright or an actor or something.
I went to an art school for my senior year of high school. So I went to a public school in Ohio, which was excellent. I had a great band program, all those things. But then I went to an art school in Michigan for 1 year, and the energy from student to student in that place was so, it was so tangible, like the difference of people who loved the same thing and like loved art and loved communicating in that way. And I just had this feeling like that this is like a really good thing for the soul, and so wouldn't it be amazing if more people, not in a concentrated art school, but like in just the world, were taking in stuff like that. I think it softens the heart. It just makes people better, I think. So it's good.
You have many gigs. You work a lot. You have a young family.
Yes.
You're busy. But when and if you have time, what do you do outside of music? Any hobbies, not music related? How do you spend your time, your downtime? If it's not sleeping, if your kid doesn't let you sleep, but then you finally get to sleep, that doesn't count as a hobby.
Well, I would say I've had many like time periods in my life where I've had hobbies I was very passionate about, whether it be exercise or fitness. That left. But at one time I loved salsa dancing, and I loved Latin music, and that was something I did for fun. But I would say the thing that since I was 20 until now that I love outside of music is film, like movies. And there's no place I love more than being in a movie theater with Sour Patch Kids and a popcorn and seeing a movie. Now, I'm not seeing many movies right now because I have a baby.
Do you have a preference in genre as far as movies?
No, I don't. I would say.
Are you watching current stuff, or you're watching classics? Or?
Oh yeah, mostly current. I would say actually the area that I'm the least well versed is older films. Not because I don't want to be, but just because my entryway was through like seeing stuff in the theater, and then it became sort of my like ritual to see everything coming out that year that was culturally relevant. Or
what was the last memorable movie that you saw in a movie theater with
Oh man,
popcorn and all that, and you say like, okay, it was worth, because that's another thing, the argument goes for and against movie theaters. Why don't you just stream it at home?
Yeah. Oh well, I mean the attention is, they're sacred to me, and like I am not. It is hard for me. My wife will tell you to stay focused. But she even knows this. Like, I really, if I'm watching a movie, I want to watch the movie. Like, and
so not do anything else.
Not do anything else,
at the same time.
And the movie theater it's not even hard. I don't think about anything. I really feel like I'm transported to just a place of total, like, I'm like giving myself away to something. I love that. I
It's
mean,
like a concert hall. You were there for
yeah,
that
no, and
sole
you're
purpose.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the last great movie I saw. I'm gonna be really mad after this interview because I'm gonna remember because like I said, I haven't seen a lot of movies because
Yeah,
I had a child
This is
in
a
May.
chance.
Yeah, but
We're not going to edit the phone call into this at 2 a.m. that
I
he's
know.
giving me.
Oh man, I'm gonna be mad later because I know I've got something really interesting. But a lot of people saw this movie, but I thought Oppenheimer was just amazing. I'm gonna regret this. I know I'm forgetting something great. I mean, I've watched most of my movies at home. When my baby was born, when I would do feedings at night or during the day, just in the dark, I'd have my headphones attached to my TV, and I would just like chip away at a movie. You know, that doesn't happen as much anymore. But when he was feeding all the time, that happened. Yeah, I would say Oppenheimer was the last incredible
You also watched
thing
Barbie at the same time?
I recorded Barbie on the
Oh,
soundtrack.
there you go,
Yeah,
there
so I
you go.
did go see Barbie. Of course, I saw Barbie like 3 times. I was just trying to help my retirement. Yeah. So Barbie. Actually, I loved it. Did you see it?
It was a good movie. I
Yeah.
watched them both. and
Are you pro Oppenheimer?
I'm more an Oppenheimer guy than a Barbie, but I was positively surprised how well done Barbie was.
Yeah.
It did make sense, you know, just by watching the teasers. It's like, do I really want to watch this? And then
Right.
when I watched it, it was just like, okay, yeah,
Right.
I get it. It's good. It's
Right.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. They did a really good job. I thought, I did get to play on the recording session, which was like especially cool. No, I didn't do much, but I was there.
It's an important part.
Yeah.
You played.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory.
Appreciate it.
Yep.